Hello, and thank you for watching my presentation on Non-Trivial Pursuit, How to Use Trivia Games for Social Emotional Learning. My name is Dr. Matt Zakreski. I'm a clinical psychologist who specializes in working with gifted and other neurodivergent people. This is one of my favorite talks to give, and let's dive right in. Um, so we're going to develop an understanding on how trivia can serve gifted and 2E learners in building social emotional skills. And we're going to workshop how to implement trivia games to test the skills of those learners. And then we'll take the time to process potential challenging moments that come up during the trivia process, and we'll develop the skills to overcome and navigate them. Now, if we were doing this in person, we would actually play some trivia and we would use that as a workshop. Since we're not together at the moment, I'm going to use some case examples to demonstrate some of the problems you might run into and give you some suggestions for solutions on how to make things better. So I'm going to start by telling you one of my favorite trivia stories. So after I graduated undergrad from Wake Forest in 2006, I took a job working at the biopsychophysiology lab at Harvard University. And after I had worked at the lab for a while and I had made some friends with the other lab techs, one day after work, somebody pulled me aside, like, "Hey, do you like bar trivia?" I said, "Well, yes, I do very much. I'm 22 years old and a gifted kid, and I like knowing things and I like bars." And I said, "Great, great, great. You should come with us and you should be on our trivia team. We play in this elite underground trivia league in Boston, and we play against all the other good schools like MIT and Boston University and Boston College." And I was like, I am so in, thinking, oh my gosh, these people must think I am super smart. Like I am on the team. And they said, yeah, yeah, we've got people who know math and science and literature and calculus. You're really good at pop culture and sports, right? Yes, I am. And I was just happy to be on the team. So we played three trivia rounds in this elite league, and we went 3-0. I was a big contributor to those teams, but it really just sort of showed me that a bunch of smart people in a room sort of showing each other how much they know is kind of awesome. And I love telling that story because, you know, surrounding yourself with other really smart people can bring out the best in you and help you make lifelong bonds with someone. So let's talk about some of the strengths of being gifted or twice exceptional. You know a lot of things. It may not be the things you're supposed to know, but you definitely have a lot of knowledge. And you like to share how much you know. You might have a YouTube channel, you might monologue at the dinner table, you might have collected every single book on the Peloponnesian War. You like knowledge, you like sharing that knowledge with other people. Many gifted and 2E people are competitive and enjoy winning, and many gifted and 2E people think and process quickly. These are why a lot of gifted people end up playing Quiz Bowl. I was a Quiz Bowl kid, and all of these parts of the gifted neurotype play into being successful at Quiz Bowl. But since you're attending this talk, you also know that there are some weaknesses and struggles for being gifted in 2E. The emotional intensity often can get in our way, big feelings about winning, big feelings about losing, big feelings about struggling. Um, Gifted and 2E people, in part because they have bigger feelings and in part because it's harder for them to find meaningful challenge, often don't develop resiliency in the same way as neurotypical people. So because you have failed less or been challenged less, you may have a weaker or less consistent resiliency than your neurotypical peers. And that can make failure or struggling harder, which means that you may struggle to connect with your peers. You might have a tougher time losing or a tougher time being excluded, and thus have a tough time with teamwork. When you watch gifted and 2E people work together, everybody wants to be the captain. Nobody wants to be the soldier, right? It's a whole bunch of chefs. Nobody wants to cut onions. And to be a good member of a team, you've got to work it like a kitchen brigade, not just everybody trying to be Gordon Ramsay. So, one of the things that we know about education in general is that people learn better and they sustain that knowledge longer if they learn experientially rather than didactically, right? The traditional education model is the sage on the stage who talks about the thing they're teaching at length. And there's always going to be room for that in education, but not all things can effectively be taught didactically. And social emotional learning is one of the top examples of that. You can't tell someone, hey, the next time you're in this situation, do this because situations adapt and grow and evolve in ways we cannot predict. You've got to effectively teach people what we call in vivo, right? Live in experience. And when we do things live, we get the sensations of those feelings, we navigate them in real time, and we get to benefit from the experience of overcoming that challenge. And then that lays the neural tracks of like, oh, I can do this. Real experiences better connect the skills we have and develop moments to use them. Real experience gives us more insight in how to use things rather than just sort of having a giant box of tools, knowing that you use a hammer here, a screwdriver here, a bandsaw here. That stuff only comes with real experience. And probably most importantly for this population is that experiential learning naturally pushes back on black and white thinking. We know a lot of the people we serve will say things like, I can't do this. I'm the smartest or I'm the dumbest. I won't play if I won't win. And it's easy to think that way because it's protective, but real life doesn't work that way. We've got to push back on that black and white thinking because ultimately that's what's going to move our kids forward once again in a meaningful way. Real life experiences give you things like, oh, I can work as part of a team, or yeah, we finished in second place, but we had a lot of fun. Or I really thought I was the smartest kid in school, but Becky is actually a little bit smarter than me in these things. Now, when we process this, when we support our kids through it, we're going to make sure that they have those experiences in a positive growth mindset. But the only way to get these experiences in a meaningful way is to experience them. So, with all the things, why trivia? So, trivia is like an exercise for the mind. It works on strengthening the intersection of the frontal cortex and the hippocampus, where our memory is. It's a natural way to gain new knowledge because you're not going to know every question while recalling old information. So sometimes something you knew about one thing may trigger a insight to another answer. Trivia is fun. Lots of dopamine is involved in playing trivia games. Getting an answer is exciting. Knowing an answer is exciting. These things matter. Trivia is lower stakes than quizzes or tests or formal competition. While I love Quiz Bowl and I think Quiz Bowl's awesome, trivia is a lot safer. It's a safer place to practice. It's a safer place to develop teamwork skills because the stakes are lower, right? I would rather play trivia with my friends after school than I would have to develop those skills in the state semifinals because at that point, well, the stakes are real. Trivia is a sneaky way to practice study skills because we have to learn a lot of things. We have to be recall that information and transfer it in some ways. And like we've talked about, it's an organic, experiential way to practice social emotional learning skills, especially cognitive flexibility and resiliency. So why trivia for these kids? I always, this is a slide I always show the kids that I work with when I do trivia units. And I say, first off, you can't know everything about everything, I promise. And then they'll all flex and they'll say, but I can, I'm very smart. I know many things. Yes, you do. You know a lot of things, but it's impossible to know everything about everything. This is where the organic teamwork stuff comes in. Part of that is what do other people know that you don't, right? Think back to the Harvard trivia team. They had US history, world history, languages, math, science, art, astronomy covered, right? They knew everything that was in the Met. They knew everything that was in Galileo's work, right? What they didn't know is who won the Grammy for Best Hip Hop Artist in 1995. That was something I knew, right? So understanding that other people know things that you don't, it does make them better or worse than you. It just acknowledges that other people exist with different skill sets and experiences. And if you see those different things as a mosaic, ultimately the mosaic creates a beautiful picture more than you could do on your own. Trivia is repeated, meaningful challenge, especially if you integrate different kinds of thinking into trivia, which we'll talk about in a little bit. It's an opportunity to practice winning, which is really important, and practice losing. It promotes leadership and teamwork. You can, as the teacher or the facilitator, you can put different kids in leadership roles and watch what happens. Even if it's making sure that one kid who doesn't talk much gets to bring the answers up to the teacher, or you give everybody, a captain's role and let them decide who's going to do what on the team. These are ways to sort of organically practice those skills. And most importantly for this population is the role of luck. Trivia is not about what you know, it's about how lucky we get. And my my example for this actually comes from the musical, the 23rd annual Putnam County Spelling Bee. And one of the songs in that is sometimes you get lucky and get a word and sometimes the person next to you gets a word that's impossible. And if you're familiar with the show, they actually bring audience members up on stage, and I got to be one of those people. And the person in front of me got the word cow. And, I'm not a real brain buster there. And I got the word Pakapoo, which is a Japanese lottery system. And I spelled it incorrectly because who the heck has heard the word Pakapoo before? And the whole premise of this, right, is that sometimes you get lucky and sometimes you don't. There's no way to prepare for every answer. So you have to give up a certain amount of control to be successful at trivia because you might just get lucky and get a question you know. You might get totally unlucky and all the questions are stuff that you've never heard of. It happens. So if we're going to play some trivia, let's consider some questions. Do you roll dice or do you go one at a time? There are advantages to both. Personally, I like to go one question at a time. I find it gives me as the facilitator a little bit more control, but you can certainly roll dice and have people, move along the board in different ways. Teams or individuals, right? I think it's important to do teams for this. You can do teams of 2 or 3, start small. And if teams, how many people per team? What do you do if somebody wants to quit during the game? Very common thing in this population, right? Somebody gets a question wrong. It's not Henry VIII, it was Henry VII, and they scream and they're like, this is stupid. I hate it. I quit. What do you do? Right? I always find in those moments, instead of saying, okay, fine, you quit, you can't play anymore. It's like, take a minute, get a drink of water, take a breath, come back when you're ready. We would still love to have you, but I understand you're upset right now. On the other side of that, you get somebody who additionally doesn't want to play, like that's stupid or that's too hard or I won't do it. But they're clearly paying attention. They're following along, and about halfway through the game, they sort of lean up. They're like, "Can I play?" And I say, "Absolutely, right? You can jump in on the team that's in last place, right? You can, you can jump in on the team with the smallest number of people. Be strategic with it, but you don't want kids to cherry pick, right? And just jump in at the end to win the ring. You want to make sure that you're being strategic in doing so. So guidelines are important for any intervention, especially we know gifted people love their rules. So we want to set expectations. How does this work? Follow those rules. What are the rules? Let's make them explicit. Make sure that what people know what to do. I always tell them don't answer other people's questions, right? If I ask the room, what's the capital of New Jersey? And Sally over at table 3 yells Trenton. Well, the whole room knows the answer now, and maybe somebody thought it was Newark or Jersey City or Atlantic City. So you don't want to yell out the answers, right? How do you talk to your teammates? Same thing. Do you want to whisper or do you want to shout? Do you want to do that gifted kid whisper where you think you're whispering, but you're actually talking very loudly? And one of my favorite rules is be kind or be quiet. So whether you're talking to your teammates or the other teams, if you don't got something nice to say, don't say it, right? Because the one thing that I will do is I'll take points away from teams that are bullying or making fun of other teams, especially if there's a big point differential. It's like, all right, fine. Well, yeah, your lead of 40 points is now 30 points because I took 10 points away from your team for being bad sports. I'll make that rule explicit up front so they don't think I'm being capricious. But it's important to let them know that that's an organic response to being a bad sport. And of course, cheating. I mean, here we are sitting here, and most of us have these phones in our pocket. I mean, these phones have Google or Bing or whichever one of those you prefer to use. So, I mean, I want our kids putting their phones in their bags or their backpacks somewhere where they can't use them. Let us remove them from temptation. Same thing with your Chromebooks, right? This should be analog. This should be the knowledge you have or the knowledge you can figure out, right? And the only thing that would get me to remove somebody from the game is if they consistently cheated, right? So we have traditional trivia questions. Now you're going to get this as the handouts for attending this talk. So you'll have several trivia sheets that I've whipped up for you. All of them are A, B, C, D options. You can eliminate those if you want, especially if you have older kids. But I like to give kids options because it sort of streamlines the process a little bit. Um, this is modeling what we call vertical thinking. If you imagine all of our knowledge as a giant bucket, you can reach into the bucket, pull out the thing you know that's the answer. Schools give us a lot of opportunities to practice vertical thinking, so it's a good thing to do that here. It maps on nicely to taking tests and quizzes and taking the SATs and all that sort of thing. Also processing speed. We want to give meaningful time limits, 30 seconds or a minute, but understand that some kids may need more time. And if kids need more time, how are you going to do that? And then talking about how they collaborate and communicate with others. It may make sense for them to, if once we let them know what the categories are, like have the kids identify which one of these do you feel comfortable with, which one of these do you feel like you don't know at all. That way, we're normalizing conversations about strengths and weaknesses and having an open strategy session about how to do this best. So here are my traditional trivia categories: ELA, English languages arts, books, authors, stories, grammar, that sort of thing. Grab bag can be anything. Yay. Science, biology, astronomy, physics, chemistry, geography, all that stuff. Pop culture or PC, TV, movies, Netflix or streaming, comics, YouTube. Kids love this category. History, US government, World War Ones, anthropology, leaders, flags, etc., etc. Math, um, famous mathematicians, mathematical concepts and theorems, but not math problems. I find math problems to be important to learn, but the wrong skill set for the trivia world. So I will leave those for my math colleagues. And then what I like to call the Bridge of Destiny, which is backwards questions, which we'll go through in detail just in a little bit. So I've put traps in my trivia board. If you get on a bomb question and you get it wrong, you lose a turn. Now, if you're on a regular square and you get it wrong, nothing happens, right? You just didn't get it right. But bomb means you lose a turn. So you're gonna have to monitor that as the teacher or facilitator to make sure that, hey, okay, I know that thing. I know that this team doesn't get the answer this time. A spring. If you get a question wrong, you go all the way back to start. Now, if this happens to kids, they are going to freak out. They are going to lose their minds. And let them be upset and then remind them that this happened to you. It could happen to any other team. You might be in last place now, but you may not be in last place for long. So all you can do is do your best, right? And then last, the Bridge of Destiny, which is both a shortcut and a trap. So the Bridge of Destiny is when we ask questions backwards. So I might say, um, you know, Chunky Monkey, Chubby Hubby, everything but the and One Sweet World. What's the category? And you would say ice cream flavors, specifically Ben and Jerry's ice cream flavors. Now, that's a backwards trivia question, right? I gave you the answers, you have to give me the category. But if the kids can't think of that Bridge of Destiny question, they're going to keep getting Bridge of Destiny questions until they get off the bridge. So it's a high risk, high reward strategy. And then the finish line. For every group that makes it to the finish circle, they have to answer one more question to win. And you're going to pick another group at random to pick the category of the question. Now, it's important. They don't get to pick the question themselves, right? But they get to pick the category. So you might say team 3 makes it to the finish line. You pick team 7, pick a category for them. Now, this is another theory of mind exercise. How much have they paid attention to what team 3 is good at or not so good at? Now, a lot of kids will just default to picking grab bag, which is fine, right? Go with the most random thing. But if you know that's a really strong humanities table, you might want to give them a math or science question and see what happens. That's not being mean, that's being strategic, and there's a difference. And if you get a question wrong in the finished circle, nothing happens. You just get to try again next round. We repeat the process. But if you get the question right, you win. And if more than one team wins, you repeat the final process until one team is the winner. I once had a group of middle schoolers had 3 out of the 4 teams make it to the finish line on their own. And it was like the Hunger Games. They just kept getting questions right, or they would all get them wrong, and they just kept going and going and going. And 9 rounds later, we finally had a team win. And they weren't even happy. They were just exhausted by that point. It was very exciting. So here's my trivia board, right? And you'll get this as a handout in the uh, in the handout in the emails for this. So just keep an eye out for this. But you can see all the different things. We've got our math, history, pop culture, grab bag. There's our spring. There's our bomb. Science, ELA, math, pop culture, right? And around we go. We have 3 Bridge of Destinies. Each one of them represents a bit of a shortcut. And so you might have a team who answers this question for ELA, decides to go on the Bridge of Destiny, and they're going to get the shortcut, but they have to get that answer right. So the team who chooses to go the long way may end up on a history question, know that, and just jump all the way forward to the next question, leaving the people on the Bridge of Destiny. So they've got to decide what works for them. And there are a lot of other ways to play trivia that are worth going through here, because we want to test different kinds of thinking, practice different ways of engaging with information, because that's really what our kids are going to need most from us, especially in the modern classroom. So one thing is visual cues, right? So here we have a bunch of logos, right? How many of these can you name, right? And, yes, it's a little, capitalist, but that's the world we live in, right? And what this is a very different kind of thinking. It's testing a different kind of the brain. And some kids might say, well, this is stupid. Like, I mean, why does it matter like what that crown thing is? Well, it's about being a citizen of the world, right? These logos, whether they're good or not, they carry a lot of cultural weight, and they're things that we deal with for being members of the world. So there is value in knowing what these things are. So you could send visual cues. Um, I also love doing abstract questions. We can say that this is a part of SAT prep for sure, but also it gets into that gifted ability to not just know things, but be able to abstract that information, right? Forming connections or relationships between concepts. A lot of gifted kids can be very rigid, concrete thinkers, which means making abstractions can be hard for them. Let's let them practice, right? So, for example, if hammer is to nail, then screwdriver is to blank, right? Wrench, lug nut, screw, or tack. So the answer is clearly C for screw. And now we're seeing an abstract relationship between those things. If Superman is to Lex Luthor, then Spider-Man is to, and then you can see like, all right, what are our options here? J. Jonah Jameson, Felicia Hardy, Kingpin, Otto Octavius. Now, those are all characters in the Spider-Man universe. So we need to think about which one is the best answer, right? That one is a little bit more subjective. So we want to think about what does that mean? For me, by the way, the answer there is Kingpin, because not only are they both business empire giants, they both have their superpowers are their incredible intellects. So that's where I would go. Whereas like Felicia Hardy is more of an anti-hero, and Otto Octavius is just straight up supervillain. The New York Giants is to the Lombardi Trophy, then the Detroit Red Wings is to the what? Now, you might not be a sports fan at all, and that's why I've included this as a thing here, because gifted people might disparage knowing sports or pop culture because they don't think it's important. Well, it's a big way to connect with people, and it's a part of living in society. So the Detroit Red Wings are an NHL team, National Hockey League. They win the Stanley Cup. And then last but not least, if Florida is the Sunshine State, then New Hampshire is the, and people are like, wait, which one could that be? Right? So we need to figure out the answer. We also can do word puzzles. So these are different ways. Once again, we're figuring out that sort of abstract thing. So if you get someone, what is 57 HV? You might model after them. That is 57 Heinz varieties, right? That's on the bottle. BR31F, Baskin Robbins famously has 31 flavors. Okay. 7 Wonders of the World, 101 Dalmatians. You know, this is really sort of testing their ability to do lateral thinking, right? We've talked about vertical thinking, the way to just reach into a bucket, grab the information, and pull it out. Lateral thinking is taking information and stretching it until you find a pattern or insight that you wouldn't have otherwise. 12 a.m. on the surface looks like a time, but if we know it's hinting at something, we might say, like, okay, 12 what? 12, well, what are culturally significant 12s? And you might say, oh, if you're a theater kid, oh, 12 Angry Men. There's your answer. One of my gifted claims to fame, fame might be the wrong word here, but it's certainly something I did as a kid. I used to draw rebuses for fun. Yes, please don't be too jealous. But this is once another way of getting into that visual cortex, really thinking about that abstract processing. So, 17 is ice to the power of 3. What does that mean? Well, it's ice cube. Um, and you might say, um, number 8, what canceled, but it's like in a diagonal. Oh, it's a check. Oh, it's a canceled check. Right now, they may not even know that reference, right? Checks aren't super culturally relevant anymore, but we can help them navigate those things, right? And you could absolutely do this as a demo and then have kids make their own and then pick the best 20 or so and put them in rotation. And and the kids will say, well, but like, what if I get one I drew? Well, yeah, that's the luck part of trivia. So there's a lot of additional resources here, right? The importance of trivia games for mental health, how to do things for team building. This stuff works obviously with adults as well as it does with kids. Um, and here's how you track me down if you have any questions, right? As as um as videos go, this is not one of the longer ones we do because ultimately it's about just asking the questions from the questions sheet that I'm going to send you and following the map. But give yourself permission to attach this stuff to your teaching goals and putting that out there in a way for your kids to engage it with. Because when kids have fun, when they engage, when they get that experiential piece of learning, they learn more, they remember it longer, and they apply that information better. And we're giving our kids a lot of resources that they're going to need, not just in the classroom, but in life. So until we meet again, my name is Dr. Matt Zakreski. Here's how to track me down if you need anything. Thank you so much for your time and attention. And I'd love to hear how this goes if you implement it in your classroom. So please shoot me an email here with how it works. And I hope we get to talk in person sometime. Have a great day.